And I think that if the international community could come up with a reasonable proposal for near-term elections, perhaps through a Security Council action, and then if the international community could bring to bear its substantial resources, resources like the National Democratic Institute, like IFES, International Foundation for Electoral Systems, the UN Development Program. The Europeans have any number of similar organizations, that we could create a dynamic where the question becomes how practically does Saleh hand over power to successors, instead of getting stuck in a impasse that he needs to do it tomorrow, and then we'll talk about what comes next. We need to do a little bit of talking about what comes next, lock that in a reasonable time frame, and then I think you can get Saleh on the exit ramp if you have a combination of international pressure and domestic pressure.
Great. Let's open the floor to questions. The individual in the back here, if you could please state your name and affiliation, and if anybody in the overflow room has questions, we have some chairs here in the front, but there are question cards in the back as well. So please.
Overflow room.
Yes.
This is music to my ears.
Right. There are two in the front here. You can sort of sneak around. Sorry. It's a little bit tight, but.
My name is Hunter Price. Thank you for speaking today. My question goes back to the development side of your book. In the last couple of years, I understand USAID has been pouring over $100 million into a couple of programs, the Community Livelihoods Program and the Responsive Governance Program. I was wondering if you could comment on how effective those have been, and what, if any, changes are going to be needed to USAID's approach and the development approach in general going forward, given the recent events.
Well, I think that in one particular area, we have been counterproductive, and that's not the programs that you have mentioned, but rather the NDI program to try to propose dispute resolution in the tribal areas. And it backfired in a number of ways. Most importantly, I think it backfired in alarming Saleh and the government that we had ulterior motives in these remote areas, and we're playing a game similar to that which Saudi Arabia had played previously in the past. And I think a lot of the restrictions on our activities derived from that. So let me just get that on record and get that off my chest. These other programs for aid, I don't know. I'd have to defer to someone who's been there recently. I think there's always a risk with USAID in that we have solutions invented here that we take out there and we want to impose on the Yemenis. And some of the more sophisticated capacity building, I think, risks being perceived by the Yemenis as really social engineering and lacking deliverables, not being able to see a real difference. So my prejudice in this is to keep U.S. assistance very simple, almost elemental. And in the book, I describe how, in relating to the tribal areas, we talked to the leaders and we talked to the people, and we got a short list of priorities, which were health, hospitals, clinics, schools, roads, jobs, agriculture. And what our approach was pretty basic, to go into places where they wanted these kinds of things and to find ways that we could help deliver them and simultaneously work with the Yemeni government to reform the relevant ministries so that what we did was sustainable. So that's my prejudice. I think at the end of the day, you want the average Yemeni to be able to look and see something, some change in his or her life as a result of not only the U.S. Assistance efforts, but also the Yemeni government's efforts on their behalf. Alan?
I wonder if I could, excuse me. Thank you, Alan Kieswetter, and congratulations on your book, first of all.
Thank you, Alan.
And I'd like to ask what you see as the antibodies to Al-Qaeda, and particularly the role of the tribes. Are they part of the antibodies?
Yes. This goes to our concept of Al-Qaeda terrorism, in which we envision Al-Qaeda operatives coming into societies and really functioning as germs or an infection which can grow, can spread, and has to be countered. And that countering can come from the outside, but it's much more effective if the local society evolves its own resistance to this and deals with it itself rather than the U.S. coming and doing it. And I think the clearest example, I'll give you two examples, Alan. One was the Central Security Forces of Yahya Saleh, which with a modicum of training, with a modicum of equipment, we're talking here about basic arms, body armor, night vision devices, and then some mobility, was able to play a effective role in going against the degraded Al-Qaeda network during my time. And as the book explains, after we took out the head of Al-Qaeda in Yemen, virtually all of the other arrests or eliminations came from the Yemenis themselves, and primarily the Central Security Forces. So that would be one example. I'll give you another example, though. In Medkhel, which was this location where we built our first clinic, it was a project that cost $250,000. And I have some before and after slides, if I can get to them. That's the clinic in Medkhel before we did anything. And if you can see, it's got, you can't see, but just written on that building, Mustashfa. And obviously,